Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ACEC Research Institute's Future of Engineering Roundtable Series. In today's session, Progressive Design Build, Practice, Perception, and Potential. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping announcements. For the easiest view, move your mouse to the top of your screen and select Gallery View. This will allow you to see all panelists. Your microphone was muted upon entry, but if you wish to ask a question or offer a comment, please feel free to type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to answer as many questions as time permits. This event is open to the media, and the press is invited to participate as well with our other attendees by asking a question through the Q&A box. If you require any technical assistance, please feel free to send a message to ACEC Research Institute privately through the Q&A box, and I will be happy to assist you. Now, allow me to introduce the Executive Director of the ACEC Research Institute, Daphne Bryant, who would like to say a few words. Daphne?
Thanks, Carrie. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. We are glad that you're here with us for this next Future of Engineering Roundtable, looking at our Progressive Design Build project we've been working on. This is a three-part project, and this is part one of the firm survey, and we're excited to share some of the results from that. And we've got a great panel pulled together that is going to help us not only talk about the results, but then what those really mean and what they're seeing and reacting to that as well. So I want to introduce you to our panel. Actually, I'm going to let Kevin do that. Kevin McMahon is our senior research consultant at the ACEC Research Institute, and he is going to moderate our session today. And Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to you to introduce your great panel.
Great. Thank you, Daphne. Yeah, we do have a great panel. And let me introduce them according to how they're aligned on the screen here. First, Keith Bolinar is the Dean of the College of Engineering and Applied Science at the University of Colorado at Boulder, which is one of the nation's leading undergraduate and graduate engineering programs. Keith is responsible for over 9,000 students and faculty, and he's the principal investigator on the current Progressive Design Build study, where ACEC Research Institute is partnering with DVIA and the Pankow Foundation. Keith, thank you so much for joining. Next, we have John Donatelli. John is the president of infrastructure engineering for Kiewit, which is one of North America's largest and most respected construction and engineering organizations. Kiewit designs and builds some of North America's most remarkable projects. Prior to joining Kiewit, John held senior positions with major U.S. engineering firms and national contractors. He has a BS in civil engineering from Ohio University. Next on our panel is Joseph Gildner, and Joe is Deputy Executive Director at Sound Transit, the public transit agency serving the Seattle metro area. Sound Transit is building the most ambitious transit expansion in the country currently. Joe has a BS in civil engineering from Notre Dame and a master's in civil from the University of Illinois. And we also have Eric Osveld, who is the president of Design Build for Michael Baker International. And Eric oversees all design build projects and pursuits for Michael Baker, as well as company-wide quality and project management. Eric has a diverse background in infrastructure design and construction, having worked on projects ranging from 50,000 to 12 billion. That's a big range, Eric. He has served in the roles of owner, designer, and contractor, so he has firsthand experience of all three perspectives that we need to build our actual infrastructure projects today. Eric has worked for 18 years with AEC firms, as well as 10 years with Washington State DOT. He has a BS in civil from Washington State University. Thank you so much, panel, for joining us.
Yeah, Kevin.
Keith, can you start off with an intro to Design Build?
Yeah, I sure can. Thank you. And I appreciate everyone's attendance here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to provide a little bit of an overview on the research that we've been doing and a little bit of context for our discussion. So as Daphne said, this is a research project I'm going to present some results from. It's a 2-year research project, and This first portion is the results of more than 400 responses to a questionnaire to ACEC firms, Design Build Institute of America firms, and others who've participated, and it focuses on progressive design build. And so I'll start by sharing those results, and just a look ahead, I'm going to end by asking for a call for your participation as well as we move to the next phase of our research. What really got us motivated in this has just been the increase of use of design build over the last 30 years. It's hard to believe from my perspective, but we've reached a point where design build is being used on almost 50% of all design and construction in the US market. We did a market study a few years back for ACEC, which is on the Research Institute website. You can see that kind of speaks to how design build is being used, and also ended up finding some challenges, especially from the engineers side, the design engineers side. And, you know, we really did see there were difficulties in managing risk and insurance, keeping claims to a minimum, and then some opportunities to enhance collaboration even more and strategic relationships. So that got us looking at the evolution and where we are in trying to mitigate some of those issues. And it really has led us to progressive design build being a method, a approach to design build that alleviates some of those challenges, or at least mitigates some of the for the design side, some of those risks and challenges that we're seeing. And so I'm just going to show one slide here that gives you an overview of how we're defining progressive design build. I know there's a lot of flavors of this, but it really is defined on just a few key characteristics. And so the major things are it's two phases. One is a pre-construction phase, and in that pre-construction phase, before you start construction, you get to agreement on what that project scope is, or work through a validation process of that scope. It starts with the owner having some level of design definition, but selecting a design builder purely through qualifications. This is one of our major findings and major definitions there, that we're not competing through a best value or a lump sum competition for design build like other methods, but this is truly selecting the design builder through qualifications-based selection and working towards a target price. That target price then at the end of phase one turns into what we're calling the design build pricing. That can take a couple of different formats, but a guaranteed maximum price, or it's a price that we know we can start construction with, and that both teams, the owner team and the design builder team, have agreed upon to move forward. From there, you go ahead and execute design and construction. That can be through some work packages as well, but let's just keep it simple here, that after that agreed upon pricing and commercial terms are all finalized, you move forward rapidly through design and construction through a common design build method. So it's really the unique piece is that phase one, the risk allocation, the transparency and open book pricing, and getting to that agreed upon scope in the design build pricing. There is one other element that is exercised, not frequently, but is an option for the owner, and that is there is an off-ramp option at that point. So if scope and price cannot be agreed upon at the end of phase one for a variety of reasons, the owner can go ahead and execute that off-ramp and then finish the design and construction through some other project delivery method, even going to the point of low bidding it if that's the choice. But that's really just to provide some context for us in our discussions today, what progressive design build is, and love for you to learn more about that. And I'm just going to finish on this. We have this report available. Again, this was based on over 400 responses. to our questionnaire about progressive design build. You can see why we were doing it, to try to get a data-driven assessment, identify benefits and challenges, and then get to some practical guidance. And we really were surprised by the results here. What we found was more than 80% of our firms that responded are seeing increasing volumes, both in number of projects and overall value of progressive design build projects over the last 5 years. So it's really here and it's increasing. That's because of the collaboration and team dynamics, the owner involvement in setting that shared set of goals and scope before moving to phase 2, and then the promotion of transparency and trust that you get from that. So those are the benefits, and I think why we're seeing those increases. A surprising result to me was it did turn out to be, of the variety of delivery methods, the one that allocated risk the best or most equitably in terms of the 400 plus firms who've been working on it. I had imagined with design build low bid or design build best value that we would see that, but it was actually rated higher than CMGC, construction manager, general contractor, or CM at risk, and even higher than integrated project delivery. And so that's something we want to explore more. My intuition might have been that integrated project delivery would be better at risk allocation, but it actually turned out that progressive design build was rated as better at risk allocation. But that did lead us to some challenges, and that is there's still states that don't allow, and the federal government, progressive design build to be used on some project types and in some project locations. There's still challenges with design firms and contractors, the familiarity, training, and culture that you need. And then we're really running into struggles around insurance. I think we'll talk about that a little bit today as well, but risk allocation and insurance, as this is really driving the market, has been a challenge. So with that, I'm going to end on this slide and just ask if you would be interested. What we're looking for our second phase is for you to contribute your experience on completed design, progressive design build projects. So if you're participating today and you've been involved in a progressive design build project that's been completed, what we're doing is doing completed case studies at a large volume to try and really get into the details of the characteristics and the process around progressive design build, what's working well, and where are we still seeing challenges. And then that'll help us to get to best practices for owners, design firms, design builders, and stakeholders participating in this. So with that, Kevin, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I hope that provided the context you were looking for, so we can discuss progressive design build today.
Keith, it did. Thank you very much. And you mentioned off-ramping, and we'll get to that topic downstream a little bit. I know a lot of folks have a lot of interest in the concept of off-ramping and how it works in reality, et cetera. You mentioned 3 words that I picked up on: trust, transparency, and collaboration are critical for progressive design build success. So let me ask the panel, we'll start with Joe, the owner. The question is, what are the biggest challenges in aligning the goals of the owner, designer, and builder during the early phases of progressive design build? Joe, what do you perceive to be the biggest challenges in getting alignment among these different participants?
Sure, thank you. Appreciate that. And Keith, thank you for the opening remarks. Kevin, really the key for us, again, for a little bit of background for our audience, Sound Transit is moving into its first progressive design build delivery on a $1 billion operations and maintenance program. I'm going to start with us as an owner, recognizing that we're moving into this, building off tradition from traditional design build and GCCM. So for us, we really need to invest in the training, and that's what we're doing first and foremost. We've had over 100 of our staff, key staff, top down, from executives all the way down to frontline supervision, really going through the training. And I do appreciate the work we're doing with ACEC as well as DBIA, because we need to understand the why and the how and of this delivery method and how we can really get superior results building off our lessons learned from traditional design build and GCCM. So for us, first and foremost, it's really about, as you say, understanding how we can think differently and team up differently to promote that trust, transparency, and collaboration. For our contractors and our designers, recognizing that, and we have a request for qualifications that's out right now, and we're going to get statements of qualifications next week, next Thursday for the first time. We're excited about that. Right up front, we set in the RFQ documents for this first progressive design build the reasons why we are using the system, and it touches on everything that Keith was just talking about. Looking for that opportunity to promote a different way of collaborating in partnership with both the designer and the contractor. Looking for a delivery method in terms of budget transparency, in terms of that open book. We've certainly have experienced that with our GCCM, and we're looking to partner with that contractor based on the qualification selection to really promote that. Scope maximization is another thing that's very important. I think completion within the schedule. We also want to make sure it's a very financially profitable project for our design build team as well. So for us as an owner, it's really getting really into the right mindset. Obviously, picking that right partner, good risk allocation. I think I'll just end by saying sort of effective collaboration. I think it pivots off a good knowledge of clarity and respect for roles and responsibilities, making sure we provide as an owner, we're providing the adequate leadership and the right culture. And that includes even, the claims avoidance culture. We really need effective communications throughout this process. And again, I touched on the training that we're stepping into. So we as an owner, we recognize this is a good step for us, building off our tradition of using traditional design build and GCCM.
Thanks so much, Joe, for those words and answer. John, what's your experience with building trust among different team members from different organizations? You've done a lot of design build in your career.
Yeah, I'll echo on the words of Joe. It's extremely important, especially in a delivery model such as progressive design build, where there's full transparency in terms of the open book negotiation on price and cost, which facilitates the discussion on risk. To pile on with what Keith was saying in the research results, in our experience, it's absolutely the best delivery model for the risk allocation. But to have honest, transparent conversations around that, to know that everyone's putting everything out on the table and you're trying to do the best thing for the collective project. The team dynamics are extremely important in that. And we're very thoughtful in making sure that the folks we're putting on our progressive design builds fit the mold and the mentality that'll be collaborative and transparent and engage in those processes in the most productive way. Unfortunately, we've had some experiences where that trust and collaboration didn't materialize as you would expect or as you would hope. And it really does make the project challenging, if not impossible, to deliver. And you're really not going to see the benefits of progressive design build in those circumstances. So it's the mechanics of the delivery model are important, but the actual in practice, the team and the trust you build and the partnering starts. I mean, since it is a qualifications-based selection, the partnering begins at the very outset. It is about the collective team you're putting together. And we've seen some tremendous challenges that you can overcome from a project standpoint by building that trust and collective accountability for delivery.
Thanks, John. Eric, from your perspective of running design build engineering for Michael Baker, what do you like to see happen to build trust among the different participants on major projects?
I appreciate what Joe said about the owner training. And I think there's a lot of things that happen in the industry with the relationships that we have. But fundamentally, if the relationships are strong and trusting and people know that the project is everybody's goal at the end of the day, right? Getting the project done successfully versus defending their position, and they have the willingness to learn from each other and understand the other perspectives, I think that's the key to success in all of it. But with that, I'll caveat that we can have all the trust in the world, and if we don't have a contract in place that backs that up, that becomes challenging. And sometimes from the designer's perspective, because we tend to be the little guy in the room at these discussions and then in this process, we'll have a trust and we'll have a good relationship, but we'll have a contract that will obligate us to do something that really is difficult for us to sign up for, regardless of how much trust we have, right? Because that's what the contract ultimately does. So you need both. If you have the trust, that works out. If you have a contract that's strong, that works out. But if you don't have both, then you're going to have some challenges to get through there. So I think that this kind of communication, making sure we team up front, we find the right partners, we find the right personalities, and we find projects with the right terms from the owner and between the designer and the contractor all together that align our interests, then I think you're setting yourself up for success.
Thanks, Eric. Eric, you mentioned contract, having a good contract, and that obviously in the contract is contract language. So my question is about how important is contract language when you're looking at different procurements that, as Joe said, he's putting jobs out on the street that describe the partnering approach the owner wants to use and collaboration inherent in that partnering language. How important is that to you versus just the owner's reputation for, you know, being a good owner and collaborating and the project references or prior working together of different project participants? So are you more of a, like, I want to see that that it's in the contract, or do you just really trust the prior relationships and reputation before you want to proceed on a pursuit?
I think both of those come into play. The prior reputation is important, but I think as we've all seen in this industry, people, especially now with the generational gap that we have in talent, and a lot of the talent that we have that are running these big programs and the major jobs, we're seeing people retire. We're seeing a change in staff. So as much as those relationships are important, when you get on a multi-billion-dollar job that's going to take, 5, 6, 7 years to go from initial concept all the way through construction completion, you can't rely entirely upon those relationships to get you through the job. So I think if you have that trust and you have a contract that aligns with what those expectations are, you got to have both. But I'll tell you, at least from Michael Baker's perspective, there are some clients and owners that are doing progressive design build incredibly well across the country right now, and there are some that are really, in my opinion, not using it for the collaboration tool that it is. And we have at Michael Baker made a conscious choice to not pursue some of those opportunities, even though they're, largely funded great infrastructure projects, but the contracts and the way that they're set up just don't align with what we feel is the best interest of the project. So we do consider that in what we chase.
Thanks, Eric. One of the key considerations in progressive design build is achieving progress towards a target price. I know a lot of our audience has a lot of interest just in the mechanics of how do we get to a target price that everybody can buy into. So John, I wanted to follow up on a prior discussion we had about how contractors need to buy out a lot of the job, the amounts of the job that you're not self-performing. How do you go about that as you're putting together an estimate, and it's making progress towards what you believe to be a target price you can stand behind?
Yeah. So most of our estimating approach, I mean, we're a large company, but we still only self-perform a fraction of the work on our projects. And so in any of design, build, progressive, other, we go out to the market and get solicitations of quotes. And so one of our current progressive design builds, rather large. We had over 110 bid packages that hit the street based on the 60% design that had been developed. In some cases, we actually have strategic subcontractors that are part of the design development, involved in task force meetings and providing input along the way. So that market pricing is highly, highly valuable and important and necessary in setting these target prices. As we're all talking about the risks associated with contingency, material supply, all those things, the market informs us and the client about what they're seeing. And so any GMP or target price we're negotiating is heavily influenced and includes, we'll generally have a self-perform number and a market-based number. And collaboratively with the owner, we're now making project level decisions about how we want to move forwards. But I'd say 60 to 70% of our cost is being driven by the market, either subcontract quotes or material quotes. are included in the target price and GMP. So there's a large amount of market activity outside of the Progressive Design Build team that's being driven or is driving what the prices ultimately are, and how we then enter into a conversation with the client about risk allocation based on what we're seeing in the marketplace.
It's very informative. Joe, as an owner with a big program in Seattle, how do you factor in that big program into estimating your in-house budget for different projects? Do you factor in the amount of work that's going on in the market and how that'll inform the different subcontractor prices that John described?
Yes, certainly. And we obviously we're competing with other public owners here in the Seattle area, as well as the private sector. So we recognize as we step into our first Progressive Design Build that we need to make sure we have an adequate budget that we can collaborate and develop with the partner we're going to pick early in that early collaboration. We want, as an owner, to make sure as we go forward in that validation period that the design accounts for constructability. I think early too, a lot of times based on some of our GCCM experience in that open book, can we get a good handle on both the direct and indirect costs early in totality, so that as we're developing that target price while the design continues to develop, that we're having those good discussions, meaningful discussions, so we can continue to collaborate, especially on both sets of buckets. Again, it's been touched on. We want that possibility of fast tracking the contract, those early procurement opportunities as the sufficient design becomes available, and pricing on an ongoing basis. Enabling adjustments to maintain those budget expectations. So a lot of it really pivots off again that trust, transparency, and collaboration you touched on earlier. So it's really, Kevin, we just got to maintain that strong open book. And oftentimes I find we don't want to surprise each other because nobody wants to take an off ramp.
Yeah, I remember years ago, O'Hare had a big program, and the leader of the O'Hare program ran around the country basically advertising the program and sort of imploring different contractors and engineers to kind of come to Chicago and participate just to expand the capacity of the market to do the work. Eric, as an engineering firm, knowing that, as John described, how much of the project that they sub out, which sounds like it's typical for most large contractors, how tight do you have to be tied into the contractor's work plan to arrange your design orientation to give the contractor the design so he can get these different packages out on the street for pricing from subs?
Yeah, it's a great question. The answer is very. And I've been doing this for almost 3 decades now, and unfortunately, I don't think I've seen a fully integrated schedule that is as detailed as it could be in terms of making sure that we can all help each other out and accommodating what that schedule is. But ideally, we should be there as part of the team and integrated with it, and we should be having regular schedule updates, and the design as well as owner review and comment resolution. All those details need to be included in the schedule, and they get overlooked often because people just see this milestone for design deliverable date, and then they don't realize all the components that go into that. So that creates surprises and challenges. Then you got a contractor that's waiting for plans and they're 2 weeks late to start a construction activity. Then everybody gets surprised and disappointed. So the more integrated the full schedule is, including all of the activities, so you can really track the critical path and see where maybe a design decision to change something adds 3 days to design deliverable. Doesn't seem like a lot up front, but when that trickles out and you follow the critical path, you can see some pretty significant implications if you're not careful. So the more closely you are tied together, the more communication you are. And it's not just the setup, it's the actual maintenance of that schedule as the project continues as well. So the more the better.
This target pricing concept that we're talking about, which obviously leads to a locked-in price for the design build team. John, I want to ask you about when you look at owners coming out with preliminary estimates of what gets put out on on the street, quote unquote, and everybody in the industry is saying, oh, that's Sound Transit's got a job out in the street. Joe mentioned the one before, $1 billion. So how important is for you and your team to evaluate whether that $1 billion is reasonable to determine whether or not you want to go after that job? Is that a really important factor in your decision making?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, there's no contract model that will overcome a gap between scope and funding. While progressive design build allows us to get the risk allocation correct, if there's a significant gap between the scope and the funding available, the contract in and of itself is not going to solve that. It does allow you to deal with scope adjustments if the project lends itself to scope modifications. It's the best that we've seen that allows you to take a look at the scope. But it's a serious consideration for us. Obviously, no one wants to get into one of these with the risk of off-ramping being rather significant because there's just a gap you can't close from a funding standpoint. As I mentioned, the pricing side of it, we're going to have good market coverage. The market's going to tell us collectively as the owner and the contractor what's the price of the work, what's the price of the scope. But we spend a fair amount of time assessing, is the funding that we're aware of match the scope? And is there a solution here that we think we can contribute to? But we spend a fair amount of time, the best we can, based on the information we have of how viable is the project based on that funding. It's one of the main considerations we look at as we're making a decision if we're going to pursue a project or not.
Have you found, John, in your experience, that some owners historically are not really that good at aligning project funding with what truly the costs are going to be?
Well, I'd say as an industry, we just went through a period of unprecedented growth. It's to be fair to everybody, and I spent a large part of my career doing budget planning for an owner as they were trying to think of projects that were going to get built 7 or 8 years down the road. It's an extremely complicated task, extremely complicated, and as an industry, I think we're just wrestling with some of the growth that we've seen in the marketplace that no one could have foreseen. And so, we don't put all that on their shoulders. It's a question of, okay, when was the estimate done that their funding is based on? How far removed? When was it in time? Not casting blame for anybody, because it's a very difficult thing to do, to forecast what's escalation going to look like in the next 7 or 8 years, and in hindsight, what we just went through. So while some may be better than others, everyone has their challenges. I don't think there's any owner that hasn't experienced this, situation. I would tell you the difference maybe is sometimes the awareness of the situation is maybe greater with some. Some folks maybe get a little too anchored on the number that they had, and this is the number, and the job's going to have to be built for this number. Those really aren't productive ways to talk about delivering the project, because there's just, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place at that point. And so that's maybe more of what we've seen, is how collaborative are we going to be able to be with the particular owner? Is there scope, flexibility? How can we navigate this together? And again, we only want to get involved in jobs where we think we're in the business of designing and building things. We want to make sure there's something at the end of this where we actually get to go build something. And it's a significant part of our consideration as we look at the opportunities.
Right. And I know that, as Eric indicated, chasing projects is not an inexpensive activity, that's for sure. But Joe, how comfortable are you with your team's ability to develop, really good project funding estimates as you put a program together?
We've got a good history, but we're not just, resting on our laurels. We recognize, the market conditions are changing. I know in our RFP, our RFQ that's out on the street right now, we're making it very clear in terms of, what our budget is in 2024 dollars. It's a step program. We're looking to get infrastructure elements available to us in the next 6 years, 6 to 8 years. So we recognize that I think we feel like we have a good budget to start the validation period, Kevin, and we're continuing to look for those opportunities to make sure that we're optimizing. We're obviously in very close conversations now with our operations department. This is going to be our 3rd and 4th generation of maintenance facilities. We already have 2 up and operating. And so we feel like based on some of the history of our cost library, we've got a good budget to work with, but it's, we're going to need to validate that obviously through the open book process with this delivery method to get that validated early. So I would say we're confident, but we're not overconfident.
That's a good way to put it. It's hedging your bets. I like that. Thanks so much, Joe. Eric, we heard a lot about setting target pricing and how the owner's budget probably influences the quest for different value engineering changes and scope changes along the way from the preliminary pricing that the design build team comes up with to what the owner has in their budget. How do you estimate your engineering pricing as part of the design build package, factoring in allowances for different value engineering exercises to reduce scope and bring the price down along the way? That can be a big number, having been in that, where you have your pencils down and start doing different activities to reduce scope. It's sometimes quite detailed engineering that needs to be done. How do you price that into your estimate of your engineering price on a project?
Sure, that's a great question, and that's actually a big issue in terms of which progressives we're looking at chasing and some that we won't. Once you get to, as Keith's slide showed earlier, right, and you're in that phase one, that first phase, if it's a relatively tight, straightforward type of project and procurement, we might be able to come up with something that seems reasonable in a fixed price type of manner. But in all reality, for any of the phase one stuff, we prefer to have it as a time and materials or as we go and we all agree upon budget, because we just don't know what we're going to have to do in phase one. And really it's kind of impossible to define your level of effort. Once you get to that 60%, 30%, 90%, depending on the job and the complexity, that's where we can lock it in. So if in a perfect world, in my mind, we would have an initial phase for design where we were operating under some kind of, just like owners do with engineers in a bid build or a PS&E type of environment, we can work through. And in that sense, we can collaborate. We can do as much as we need to do, but no more than we need to do. So that seems to work out fair in my mind to everybody. And then once we're all confident on the scope and the remaining scope, at that point as an industry, I think we're all comfortable saying, hey, here's what it's going to take to get it done. And let us assume the risk on pricing going forward and lock it in and move forward. But until we have a good idea of what we're doing and how many times we're going to value engineer it, if we have to design to budget, if there's, as John mentioned, we've got a lot of things changing in the market. As pricing comes in, it may dictate a scope change if the budget is fixed. And as the designer, we'll get looked at to do the redesign to try and get us within budget, but there's a cost with that too. So, we all want to work together and make sure that we're not doing anything more than we need to, but we do enough that we can eliminate the risk to the extent that's possible for the final phase.
Yeah, I would agree with what Eric said. Our experience is the same. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's the right way to approach the phase one. Our experience also is phase one. The duration seems to get extended beyond what everyone thought at the outset, and for good reason, for just reacting to new information or challenges, or we're updating scope. A cost reimbursable model in that phase for the engineering team allows everyone to be doing the work that's necessary without feeling any cost pressure of this wasn't what I expected. So it is absolutely the right way to do the phase one, and that would be our advice to any owner looking at what's how much should you spend. It's a little bit time dependent. How much time do you have? Our experience also is every job is benefited from further design definition in the pricing as well. And so a race to get to your GMP is rarely been beneficial to any of the clients we've seen. Just there's still too much uncertainty, especially as you might be trying to navigate scope to do that funding and scope fit. You can solve a lot of challenges if you put everyone in the right position to do the best work for you on your behalf and give yourself enough time to work your way through it.
John, you might be able to trademark that. A race to get to GMP is rarely beneficial. That was a very good line. Talking about risk and GMP, this question's about, when is the discussion about risk best had? Is it during the selection or procurement phase with the owner, or is it after the design build team is selected and then they're starting to put together some preliminary designs and design development for coming up with the estimated price? Joe, what is your philosophy at your agency? Do you guys do a pretty good job of defining what you believe the risks are in the project before you put it out into the procurement mainstream?
We do. We've got a really robust in-house quantitative risk assessment process that we've used over the years and developed. Now we're going to apply it for the first time to progressive design build. So I would say we have a good matrix to start with when we bring on board the progressive design build team later this year. But again, it goes back, I would say, yeah, once we get on board, we're going to need to continue to address those risks, unknown risks, collaboratively early investigation, and, you know, with an eye toward identifying and containing. So we got a process that we can anchor on, but when we bring that partner in, we're going to need them to help us validate that and get that input. And so I'm glad we have a good, robust process. This opportunity to really establish those mechanisms between us as the owner and design professional and the construction team for early collaboration and align expectations and identify those risk items and mitigation measures is going to be key.
Hey, Kevin,
John,
I'd add to that. I mean, our view is everyone brings something to the party in the risk discussion. And especially when you get into the open book portion of the negotiation, what we've experienced is we're bringing forward the things we deal with on a normal basis that maybe because it's open book now is shared at a more detailed level. But everyone brings something to the discussion of risk that if any one party thinks, well, I've got the risk figured out and this is what it's worth. That's why this model is so attractive, is it allows everyone to collaborate and bring what their vantage point and their perspective to that risk discussion. The engineering team, the team that's got to build it, the owner from an operations, with what they actually need from the facility, all those things need to be brought together, and everyone brings something to the party in the risk discussion. And then when you build that trust and that collaboration, then you can navigate through that, all those things and bring the best project to the forefront. And so, you know, we would like we're fully aware that we're bringing our perspective, and it may not take into account everything that the owner's seeing from their standpoint. And so when we would propose on a job, we would, you know, share what we see as risks, but not try to say, well, this is everything that you're going to need to know about the risk relative to your project. But everyone brings something to the party, and as long as everyone's being heard, that's the best way to go about these.
Great, thank you. Eric, how detailed do you folks get in defining what the risks are of a project before you decide to go after a particular job? Do you discuss it with the potential design build partner, or do you try to get into discussing with the owner what their philosophy is about the different things your team has identified in the project?
Hopefully both. You know, if the team's set up right, so we've all got a seat at the table and we can have those conversations, that's the best way to go about it. I think John touched on that or mentioned that. There are relationships at times, though, where we're generally a sub to a contractor and they're working for an owner. So the direct line of communication contractually goes through the contractor to the owner. And that can be a little challenging at times. And the other thing I think I would just throw out for consideration here with the group and those listening is that we can, as a designer, we can say, hey, the risk of a 30% design changing based on new geotechnical information or based on something else is higher or lower, or, you know, we can give you some constraints on kind of order of magnitude design implications. But there's a lot of risk out there that tends to be third party, and whether or not you're going to get another approving agency to buy into something, the public is always a wild card because they've got an incredibly diverse opinion on things, and you just never know which direction that's going to go. So trying to tie down those risks through a design and get buy-in from the team is important. And then knowing how you're going to manage that risk going forward and allocate who does what with that risk at the point that it's realized, if it is. they're challenging things. And as the designer, we're a relatively small part of the overall project cost. And so for us to assume a big chunk of that risk, if it comes to realization, that's a challenge for us as well. So, we got to keep that in mind, saying, hey, if we need to really mitigate some of this risk now, let's do the extra design work up front so we're all comfortable to the extent we can be going forward.
Okay, great. Joe mentioned earlier that he has a training program for his folks to participate in progressive design build projects. So John and Eric, this question's a little bit for you guys. How do you change or evaluate the mindset of your particular folks who are used to, the design, the low bid methodology and the conventional design build work? How do you get your people evaluated whether or not they're of the right mindset to participate in progressive?
Yeah, that's actually, it is a real consideration for us. The pace is different. The pace is slower on progressive design build. We're wired a bit to push, and sometimes those two things can be at cross purposes. Well, we want to be pushing at the appropriate pace. We're pretty thoughtful about the team we put on the field. It's going to take longer. We're going to be doing project development work. We're going to be doing some value engineering as we're developing the project. There's just a whole host of things. And so as we think about the candidate pool we're pulling from, we know it's a subset of our broader pool of resources, to be frank. There are some owners that will actually mandate some behavioral analysis, and that's part of the evaluation. And so we participated in a number of those. It's more common in Canada, but we're also starting to see it with some owners down in the States. So we're very thoughtful about it, of putting the team together. We'll spend a large amount of our time putting the org chart together and thinking about the personality fit, our awareness of the client and the team will be zippering up with. But it's a real consideration. It's an absolute real consideration. And the folks that are going to ultimately build the job may not be the ones that are on the scene for the first couple of years of the project, because it's just a different skill set that's necessary as you're working through phase one and doing the estimating and then getting into phase two. So, the awareness that the team is going to evolve from the beginning to the end of the project is necessary. I think that's probably true on all parts of the organization, quite honestly, are all parties involved, from Eric's side and from Joe's side and from our side, where we're putting the best team together that's appropriate for what's necessary at that point in time. And the front end of these jobs, I affectionately call some of our colleagues outdoor dogs, meaning they're wired to be out in the field building work. The worst place we want them is cooped up in a phase one pre-con effort for 2 years. They just go crazy because we're working through job challenges that are in advance of something maybe that they've seen before. So if you came from consulting and you're used to working with owners like I have and Eric has and others, it's part of the project development that is just a different phase of the project. And we very thoughtfully go through the team of people that we need to be front and center of that phase of the job.
Eric, how do your firm evaluate who should be on the project from a personality point of view and behavior point of view?
So we've got a little bit of an ad hoc effort. We've got a team of design build regional practice leads within Baker, and they cover the country and get to know our talent really well. And to John's point, we've got more indoor dogs than outdoor dogs, I think. And at the right time in a project, we need to get the outdoor dogs out there to handle the pace as things change. But similar to what Joe's doing, we've got training programs within Michael Baker. We've got upcoming talent that has the right mentality, but maybe not the skill set yet. So we actually have day-long sessions where we'll get together with 30, 35 of our people that are interested in design build and go through what makes it different, how we handle things differently. We've got separate legal training, and that's not a claims thing, but that's just to make sure you understand the contract, and this is why it's important to do these things. So we do formal training as well as the informal training. The personality assessment, or as John mentioned a little bit, I actually think that would be a fun thing to see more of, and perhaps even in a quals phase before a team's selected, if you had to say, hey, here's the people we're going to use. And if we did that, I think it would be important for all three legs of the stool to get together to make sure you had a team that operated, because you can have three people that get along great, And you can have three people that are really good at what they do, but they just don't get along that well. And so finding, you know, a team that can collaborate and has the right personality to work together through the challenges that are going to come up, I think that's a pretty good idea.
Hey, Kevin, if I could, one thing on, again, for us as an owner, I touched on, you know, the behavioral training, you know, the 6 modules that the DBIA provides for leadership training to get get that framework around progressive design build. But next month, we're going to continue to build off that with more advanced training on developing GMPs and schedules that are tied to this delivery method. So we're going to continue to maintain our training process.
And Joe, there's a document that just got published on guidelines on open book best practices that I was just introduced to. It is important that from that aspect that everyone's on the same page about how that process should go.
You know, towards that, we've had a lot of discussions about open book, and I think the audience would be interested in how do you get your senior folks on these major amount of money projects. You know, you mentioned $1 billion before, to get trust in when the contractor and design build team is sharing their costs with your folks. How do they get comfortable that, okay, they're not pulling the wool over my eyes, or they're not trying to overestimate the cost? These are legit costs, and you know, I need to kind of trust them. How does that happen among your team members?
Is that to me?
Yeah, that's to you, Joe.
Yeah, you know, I mentioned earlier, between getting the complete picture early, and I talked about direct costs and indirect costs. I found the larger gaps usually are in the indirects for us in the past. Again, I know the market conditions between labor and commodity prices have to be flushed out as well as early, and get into that reality of what's the market going to tell us in the subs. But I often find that, you know, the indirect costs is where we can have a lot more challenging conversations. So from my experience, it's been making sure that as we're sitting down with our partners, that we're getting that early, because if we have to message up some sobering information around some of the gaps there, that we're getting good, reliable information. So, I mean, leadership's all locked in. We're fully committed to this method. It's a matter of making sure that we can have a really good, transparent, open book to get our arms around those gaps early and see where we can close those gaps.
Again, we're back to trust among the team members to really progress these concepts further. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Joe. John and Eric, how much do you want the owner involved in the early design development phase? How critical is that to, you know, ultimately having a successful project? The level of involvement of the owner.
You want to go first, Eric?
Sure. I think it's highly critical. I mean, they're the ultimate owner of the asset, and it's the vision that they have that we're trying to provide for them. So if we can get everybody in alignment and know that we've got the right common goal at the end of the day, that's significant. And if we don't have early owner involvement, and especially if the owner's got an owner's rep on board, I think that makes it even more challenging, because then there's another perspective to add to it, and that's pretty commonplace these days. But if we don't have alignment from the start, and you can't get there if you're not all sitting at the table. So I think it's highly important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, unlike design build lump sum or best value, we're not showing up with the concept that our price is based on, that we're maybe entrenched in already. It's important that we get alignment early that says, all right, what is the design? The owner's got to be involved from day one, driving the scope of the job and design decisions. So yeah, from the first day, we're having those conversations about design philosophy, scope, all those things, getting the owner's input, what their needs are, what their desires are. There's an active conversation that starts early about desires and costs and what we think might be problematic based on what we know about funding. So those things are happening way earlier than any other delivery model. You know, if you compare that to a design build lump sum, that's usually where the battle starts. Is, you know, we've got a price and a scope, and we get to the first set of task force meetings, and it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. We're already at odds on terms of assumptions that we made putting our price together versus assumptions that the owner may have with respect to what they thought the scope was going to entail. So it really does solve that challenge. And it makes it very productive if we can all get around the table from the beginning.
Joe, how cognizant are you of the current insurance marketplace for coverage as you put together these massive programs?
That's good. Good question. Thank you, Kevin. We're in the process right now with our risk management department. We're putting out we're looking at an opportunity to provide owner controlled insurance program for this PDB. We're in the process of advertising an RFP for a broker, an administrative and consulting service. We're looking very closely. We've had OSIP in the past and other delivery methods, but building off that, lessons learned, we're looking at commercial general liability coverage, builder's risk coverage, pollution liability, professional liability, and owner protected professional indemnity. So we'll be, as we're bringing on board our partner, the rest of this year, we'll be engaged in a very thoughtful conversation around those particular buckets within the insurance program. And we have a whole host of questions for this broker that we're going to bring on board on those policies that I just identified under progressive design build. So we've done it before for different delivery methods, and now we want to evolve from that and see how we can apply it for this delivery method. But we're very informed and understanding that insurance is a big issue out there in the marketplace for this delivery
Huge
method.
issue. John, how does your firm view OSIPs? Are they the greatest thing since sliced bread, or are they problematic in some situations?
We think the insurance conversation should be a discussion by all parties involved that making sure it's meeting their needs, to be honest. We often, the owner may think they're solving everyone's problems with their insurance regime, but rarely is that the case, quite honestly. We prefer for it to be a conversation to make sure everyone's needs are being met in the most efficient way that possible for the benefit of the job. Sometimes the insurance is not an efficient way to deal with the risk. And so it should fit into the risk conversation. There are unique insurance aspects of progressive design build, but it's our view there should be a conversation, should be one of the early conversations about how we're going to handle the insurance regime on the project to cover all the things. But all parties need to have a seat at the table on that, is our view.
Okay. Eric, how do you guys deal with smaller firms that you need to bring on as sub consultants to Michael Baker that may not be able to accept flow down insurance language on these major contracts?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think to John's point, there's a lot of different ways to handle it. The insurance industry is getting creative to some degree, and there's owner level, there's house policies that we can get, there's project specific policies that may or may not be available depending on where they are. But ultimately, we all end up in a position depending on what the strategy is, where we have some level of stranded risk, and that generally happens anytime you have a sub. And that's a challenge that we do have to deal with. So, and the contractor's got to deal with it with the potential design exposure. The owner's got the ultimate risk. So I don't think it's a one size fits all type of deal. We obviously have DV requirements and other subs that are strategic for reasons that may be smaller. And it does play into whether or not we use them and who we use in terms of, are we going to have somebody who's going to have a potential high risk design component and they don't have the coverage to really cover it should something go wrong. Excuse me. We do keep that in mind. So, I think that individual conversation, and that involves all three players at the table, as well as our insurance brokers. So we all have our own brokers, and our brokers all talk to each other. So there's things we can do, I think, generally, but I don't think it's a one size fits all.
Yeah, and getting all these brokers together needs another degree of collaboration and trust among them, because we've all been into some disagreements among different brokers on these jobs. Well, guys, it looks like we're at the end of our time, so I want to just turn it over to Daphne. Before I do, thank you all so much. It was very informative, and thanks for taking the time to spend with us on this emerging new methodology for design build. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. Great discussion. Lots of topic areas to cover for sure. I did put in the chat a link to the project survey that we're going to be conducting. So any of you who are listening who have completed projects, please click on that link and let us know. We'd love to reach out to you and get you involved in that conversation. Here is a QR code that will get you to the report that we've been discussing today, which was based on the firm survey that we did. And so we invite you to download that report and have a look at that. And then finally, I do want to thank all of our partners, in addition to the Charles Pankow Foundation and DBIA, who are helping with funding, all of the ACEC Research Institute partners who help fund this research. Without them, we would not be able to deliver these projects or the webinars along with them. So thank you to all of you. Thank you so much to our panelists, Joe, Eric, John, Keith, Kevin. Thanks for taking us through the discussion. It's been really great. And I wish you all a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thanks.